Hey everyone, I hope you are doing well. Right now, I am filming this video in Zacatecas, Mexico. I'm currently in my hostel here in Zacatecas. It has actually been really cold here recently, that's why I've got the jacket on. Last night I slept in this bed here, and as you can see, there are many blankets there. I had to use about 3 blankets just to stay warm. There is no heater in here, and it's more or less open air. I mean, you can see there is a like door slash window there, but there is a hole, so the air just comes in here. And yeah, it was below freezing last night, so last night was a struggle. And I actually really hate cold weather. I've actually planned this trip around the world that I've been on. I planned it around avoiding cold weather, so I think this is the coldest weather I've experienced since the beginning of the year. Yes, I know, I am spoiled in that regard. So, the topic of this video, I want to talk about this whole framework of developing countries and developed countries, also known as first world, third world. Although I feel like the first world, third world model is a bit outdated since that's coming from the Cold War era. So, oh yeah, before I get into that, I do want to talk about what exactly I'm doing here in Zacatecas. Seems like a random place to be, and actually, I think I've been here for about 2 days now, and I have seen exactly two other white people around town. I think I'm definitely here during the low season. I think the summer has way more tourists, but yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, it seems like very local, not very touristy, at least during this time of year. I walk around and it seems like it's 99.9% locals. So, yeah, why am I here in Zacatecas? So, I'm actually in the last part of my trip around the world. I'm traveling by land from Mexico City to my hometown in Texas. I'm originally from a very small town in Texas, and I'm more or less halfway done at this point. But of course, I'm not going to take the most direct route. I'm going to take my time and I'm going to try to take a very scenic route on my way back to Texas. And I don't know if you can hear that or not, but I'm literally here in the historic center. I'm right next to the main cathedral, and the bell is currently ringing now. Not sure if the mic can pick that up. Anyways, back to the topic of this video. Developing countries versus developed countries. So we tend to think, due to this framework, we tend to think that developed countries are more or less better than developing countries. When in reality, fundamentally, the only thing this model is measuring is the economic development of a country. And of course, many things coincide, or many things are also associated with the uh, monetary situation of a country. For instance, if a country has more money, then it's probably going to have better infrastructure. It's going to have better environmental conditions, so on and so forth. You get the idea. But at the fundamental level, we're only talking about how wealthy is this country. If it's a wealthy country, okay, developed. If it's not a wealthy country, if it's a like quote poor unquote country, then it's developing. It's growing. It's well, hopefully it's growing. There's a lot of developing countries that aren't developing so much at the moment. So many people would consider Mexico to be a developing country. And in this video, I want to talk about why it's wrong to solely think about countries in terms of their economic situation. And I think Mexico is a good example of this. So, in my view, there is much more to a country than its economic situation. During my travels, I've had absolutely amazing experiences in countries that many people would consider developing, countries that are not very rich. And I feel like whenever a country is not really rich, when it's not very rich, then for me it just becomes a bit more interesting. So if you're wealthy, you really don't have to be very creative with how you go about solving your problems. It's like, oh, okay, let's say that we have a bad road. Okay, well, we'll just spend money and we'll fix the road. Or, oh, I'm hungry. What am I gonna do to feed myself? Oh, I'm rich. I'll just go to a five-star restaurant and pay for my meal. It's simple. It's easy. But whenever you don't have money, how you go about solving when you're trying to solve problems, you have to be a bit more creative, right? Because you don't have enough money to just solve all of your problems by spending money. So that's one thing to consider. The people in developing countries, they still have problems. Arguably, they have much worse problems than people in developing countries, but they still have to do things to solve problems. And generally, they tend to solve their problems in very creative ways. Maybe that's by, say, growing their own food, if they're capable of doing that, or so on and so forth. I think you get my general gist here. I just find that many of the solutions that people come up with in developing countries are very creative. And another thing to discuss, which is also bouncing off of what I was just talking about, is culture. For me, this whole model of developing country versus developed country, it doesn't really take into account culture because I feel like there are some developed countries with very, very stale, uninteresting cultures. For instance, the United States, I don't really feel like the United States has a very interesting culture. And then you have developing countries like Mexico or India, much, much poorer than the United States, but they have very, very interesting cultures. In my opinion, Mexico and India those are two countries that have some of the richest cultures in the entire world. And it's not just me saying that. I mean, you can look at like UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and it's pretty evident that in terms of cultural contributions to the world, Mexico and India have given a lot. So, and when I'm talking about culture, culture is one of the most complicated words in the English language, and it's hard to define it. But for me, what I'm talking about is like the customs of the people, the food, the clothing, um, like the ceremonies, the holidays. There's a whole lot that you could talk about. But for me, traveling through Mexico, I've been to roughly 20 states in Mexico by now. I think Zacatecas is my 20th state. And there's just a mind blowing amount of cultural diversity here in Mexico regarding more or less modern things and also going all the way back to the pre Columbian times with the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Olmecs, so on and so forth. Oh, of course, another huge component of culture is language. Sure, Spanish is the main language of Mexico, but they also have loads of indigenous languages as well. I believe that there's roughly like 68 or 69 official languages in Mexico. And also talking about India, when I was traveling through India, well, when you're in the north, it's mainly Hindi which is spoken, but you go down south, and almost every state has their own language. It's really mind blowing. So I think that's pretty much all that I want to talk about in this video. I just wanted to get you thinking about the fact that there's so much more to a country than its economic status, and it's not really right to think about the quality of a country in terms of whether it is developed or developing. There are many countries that are developing that I would love to live in due to the culture. Like the culture is such a boost. And there are a lot of developed countries that just don't interest me because their culture is dry, and for me, culture is very important. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope it got you thinking about things in a different way. I hope you're thinking about things from a different perspective. But with all that being said, I am going to sign off and try to stay warm this night.